What happened because of movement in the early Republic of the United States? What happens when new settlers arrive in a land already inhabited by others, and both groups need that land to survive? What happens when the land is filled with promises of prosperity, but the promise for one group means destruction for the other? Struggles for power, control, and survival that ripple across generations and tear a young nation apart. Imagine you're a Native American leader like Little Turtle of the Miami tribe on the edge of a battlefield in 1795. Settlers threaten your people's land and culture, but you can't stop them alone. You've seen alliances between different tribes, and even with European powers, come and go. To survive, you need to keep your lands and protect your way of life. Little Turtle's speech at Fort Greenville, where he stressed the importance of tribal sovereignty, was a call to action. It was his way to say, we won't go down without a fight. But in the end, battles like Fallen Timbers were won not by Native Americans, but by the U.S. military, led by General Anthony Wayne, forcing the Treaty of Greenville. With this treaty, large territories were given up, and the U.S. expanded its reach into lands that had been home to Native American tribes for centuries. Foreign alliances shaped the outcome of these struggles. The United States was a young nation surrounded by European powers, all of which had interests in North America. The British still had alliances with various Native American tribes. These alliances were often strategic, aimed to counter U.S. expansion. In the Northwest Indian War, 1785 to 1795, Britain supplied Native American forces with weapons and military support and hoped to delay American territorial expansion into the Western lands. This support contributed to the tensions between Britain and the United States, as it became clear that British interference prolonged Native American resistance to U.S. settlement. In contrast, the U.S. also sought alliances, like with Spain, which controlled vast territories to the south. The Spanish, concerned about U.S. expansion, encouraged certain Native American groups to resist U.S. influence, which added to the geopolitical complexity of this era. As settlers moved west, it wasn't just Native American groups who felt the impact, but Spanish colonists, British, and new Americans too. The United States rapidly grew, both in population and territory. But this wasn't the Wild West of adventure stories. This was a time of political tension, with communities divided over issues like slavery. Think about how, in a crowded room, everybody fights for a seat. But instead of people, this was about ideas: slavery, land rights, and freedom. In the South, slavery had long been part of the economy, tied to the production of crops like tobacco and cotton. But as settlers moved into new territories, the question became, should slavery expand with them, or should it remain confined to the South? In the North, anti-slavery sentiment grew, especially in Pennsylvania, where the Act for the Gradual Abolition of Slavery in 1780 became the first law to end slavery in the United States. Yet, the South's dependency on slavery grew stronger, and the divide between North and South became more pronounced. The cotton industry boomed, so slavery was seen as essential to Southern economies. This expansion would only deepen the cracks in the nation and create tension over not just slavery, but the question of what it meant to be American. Politically, these tensions were reflected in the major debates between key figures of the time. Thomas Jefferson, as a leader of the Democratic Republicans, argued for states' rights and a strict interpretation of the Constitution. He believed that the federal government should not interfere with the expansion of slavery into new territories. In contrast, Alexander Hamilton, as a leader of the Federalists, advocated for a strong central government and economic policies that supported industrialization, which made slavery less essential in the North, but more crucial in the South. These different visions of federalism and states' rights set the stage for the ideological battles that would shape the future of the United States. Jefferson's vision, which focused on farms, relied on slave labor in the South, while Hamilton's vision, which emphasized commerce and industry, did not. In 1794, in the Whiskey Rebellion, farmers in western Pennsylvania revolted against a federal tax on whiskey and saw it as another example of government overreach, much like the debates over slavery. They'd only begun to distill whiskey after English taxes blocked their rum. Farmers on the frontier struggled to pay the tax, and they saw it as the government's way to tighten control over their lives. The rebellion wasn't just about taxes. It was about the right to self-governance, much like how the debate over slavery was about the right to control one's economy and labor force. The government responded with military force and sent troops to crush the rebellion. This federal response reflected how the young United States increasingly wanted to maintain control over its new territories and populations, even when faced with fierce opposition. The Whiskey Rebellion was a reminder that the federal government would assert its authority over states and territories, a policy that would continue to shape future conflicts. But not all resistance was met with military force. Some battles were fought with words. Gabriel's rebellion in 1800, led by an enslaved blacksmith named Gabriel Prosser, was an attempt to end slavery in Virginia. Gabriel's plan was to capture Richmond, free enslaved people, and ignite a larger rebellion. Torrential rain and slaves telling their masters unfortunately happened instead. Although the rebellion was crushed, it had a chance and provoked fear. Gabriel's rebellion wasn't just about one man's fight for freedom. It was a symbol of the increase of resistance to slavery and tension between the North and South. Gabriel's rebellion can be understood through an economic lens as well. At this time, the South's economy was built around farms, with slave labor as the backbone of industries like cotton, tobacco, and rice. Enslaved individuals were seen as valuable property by plantation owners, and any disruption to this system was seen as a threat not only to the economy, but to social stability. Economic theorists, such as Karl Marx, though not writing about the United States specifically, would later argue that slavery represented the exploitation of labor for economic profit, and that this would eventually create deep social divides in the United States that provoked the Civil War. As the country moved into the 19th century, the consequences of migration and the expansion of slavery were both visible and invisible. Laws like the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which prohibited slavery in the Northwest Territory, showed that there were attempts to limit slavery's reach. But these laws also made clear that the future of slavery wasn't just about moral opposition, it was about political and economic power. The New York Manumission Society, formed in 1797, advocated for the freedom of enslaved people and represented the political push from the North to end it. But in the South, the idea of slavery as essential to economic survival only got stronger, especially after slave rebellions like Gabriel's and Nat Turner's later. This period of American history was about desires: the hunger for land, the desire for freedom, and the fight for power. These tensions were not isolated events, but the nation's struggle to define itself. From the Battle of Fallen Timbers to Gabriel's Rebellion, and from the Whiskey Rebellion to Little Turtle's Resistance, these moments weren't just about land or labor, they were about identity. The early years of the United States were a contest for control of the land and its future, with the survival of some groups a threat to the existence of others. What were the results of the conflicts from movement in the early Republic of the United States? These struggles, while framed as regional conflicts, were about the soul of the nation. The battles fought over land, slavery, and freedom weren't just part of a distant past. They were the events that laid the groundwork for a much larger conflict, the Civil War. The wide rift between the North and South, fueled by issues of slavery, migration, and federal power, set in motion the forces that would tear the nation apart. As new states were formed, as new territories were opened, the question of who had the right to control land and the people on it wasn't just political. It was a question that would shape the future of the United States and lead to the biggest internal conflict in its history.